Hi everybody, Lynn Burkhead from MajorLeagueFishing.com along with Major League Fishing angler James Watson. James, you know, we're in late spring heading into summer right now, and when we get to that time of the year and the pads start coming up and the grass is really starting to come to the surface of the water, it's frog time.
It's frog time. I'm looking forward to this time of the year every year. I wish it was all year long, and you have to chase the weather or chase the what do they call that thing? The equator. If we were closer to the equator all the time,
it would be all year long.
I could throw a frog all the time.
Well, there's a difference between frogs that I like to throw, which are the soft hollow body with the two very, very sharp hooks coming out the back end, and toads. So tell me the difference between frogs and toads.
Well, there's a big difference between frog fishing and toad fishing. Mm-hmm. Frogs are an item that floats on the top and stays floating whether you're reeling it or not. Mm-hmm. And they can be walked side to side or popped real fast or slowly reeled over scum or moss or such. And they float all the time unless they fill up with water. A toad is it's more, a toad to me is more of a buzz bait type of imitation. And there's many different kinds of toads also. There's a Zoom horny toad. Reaction Innovations makes a Trixie shark. Stanley makes a ribbit. Those are three different types of toads. All of them have their own use, though.
They have their own use. When you're talking about like the buzzbait, thing that comes to my mind is like the Strike King rage toad, I think is what the technical name is. But the legs just kind of top of the water. Just
they make a very subtle buzzbait type of sound. And depending on whether I want to throw a frog, but a lot of times I like to throw a toad. And I'll throw a toad pre-spawn, spawn, post-spawn, all the way up until the end of fall.
Do you have a favorite color that you like to throw?
I keep it real simple. Very rarely do I, unless I go further south than Oklahoma, say into Texas and into Florida, I keep it really simple, and I use black, white, or they call it gray ghost.
Gray ghost.
Yeah, so those three colors are generally what I will run. The black in low light conditions, when the sun gets up a little bit more, go to the gray ghost or the white.
What about how are you going to rig that as far as your tackle setup? What line are you going to throw it on? What hook are you going to have with it? Okay. What rod and reel combo?
The critical part of toad fishing is first your line. You better have 65-pound Maxima braid or 65-pound braided line or bigger, and have it on a 7.5-foot or longer rod and a 7-to-1 or more faster reel than a 7-to-1 gear ratio reel. I throw my setup on a Bass Pro 7-to-1 Johnny Morris carbon light because it's lightweight, and I throw it on an old school Team Daiwa 7.5-foot telescopic light and tough series flipping stick with 65-pound Maxima braid, and I can throw that thing a mile. Now, the hook varies. A lot of times I'll use the toad hook made by Zoom, which is a single hook application with a screw lock in it, so I screw that in. And a lot of times I'll use one like with the Trixie shark or a ribbit. A lot of times I'll throw a toad hook that has a weight on the bottom of it.
Right.
So, again, depends on how windy it is or what kind of vegetation I'm throwing it in or how fast I want to reel that toad. Depends on which hook I use.
Is it as simple as finding some vegetation, flinging it out there, and reeling it back in? It's not, is it?
It almost. I mean, once you get an eye for what you're looking for to throw it, maybe you might get a hint of maybe some bait running around real shallow or something. The good thing about toad fishing is you don't have to have real dirty water, or you don't have to have stained water to throw it in. You can throw it in pretty clear water, and they'll come out. They'll come a long ways to eat it, just like they would a spook or a redfin or a rebel popar of some sort, or a propping bait of some sort. They'll run a long ways to get that toad, and you got to vary your speed. Okay, some toads are louder than the others. The quietest one's a Trixie shark, then the Zoom horny toad, and then the loudest one's the ribbit, of course. And the Strike King toad that you spoke of, that's kind of a louder bait too. So I want to throw that in a windier situation.
Talk to me about the eat. When they eat it, do you have to kind of let them take it like you do with the soft body?
Absolutely. Good point. Good point there. You want to pause for a second and let them eat that bait. It's the hardest thing for people
Yes,
throwing the top water is to let the fish have that bait. And when you're using braid, remember you have zero stretch,
right.
so your immediate reaction
Is immediately
is
transferred
immediate.
to the hook.
Yes, it's very immediate. It's not like mono where it's got that stretch and give. When you jack that bass, boy, you're done. Your bait's gone. So you got to make sure that you get a timing down to that, and they'll most of the time if you get your timing down, you'll dial in on that timing thing, and you'll hook 90% of them. Most people lose 90% of them.
Yeah, that would be me. Let's shift gears and go to the soft body, hollow plastic frogs that I think of, that I love to fish. You give me, I live in North Texas.
Okay.
You give me lily pads on a lake like Lake Fork. Oh man, I love fishing frogs.
That's a good one to do that.
Which frog do you like? Which colors do you like?
I like a couple of frogs. I like one of my favorites frogs is Ish's fat frog, and I like to throw the popping frog. I forgot the name of it.
Spro popping frog.
The spro popping frog. I like that one too. Ish's got a popping frog also, and it doesn't take on any water and stuff. And I keep it real simple: black, white, brown, and the spro frog. I keep it real simple. I think they call it red ear. It's a brown frog,
right?
And keep it real simple with the black and brown and white in those colors too.
Now there is a little bit of difference between a regular frog and a popping frog in how you retrieve them, because they're basically the regular frog. It's more like walking a spook or something like that. Where the popping frog is more like a poplar. It makes a little spitting or chugging.
It does, and most of the time I'm throwing the popping one. I like it. In most applications, I can throw it and I can pop real fast and just skip it across the top of the water. With a regular gliding frog or a regular frog that doesn't pop, it doesn't have that kind of action or spitting that I want.
Right.
So most of the time I will throw a popping frog, and I'll vary my cadence sometimes, or I'll just make real slight snaps with my rod tip, give a lot of slack to my line, and start walking that popping frog in, and then walk it for a little bit, and then race it to myself real quick, pop, and then start walking it again. So you got to do something a little bit different to trigger and make them come out and eat it.
Do you mentioned the Spro frog, Dean Rojas, of course, so a Major League Fishing angler.
Yes.
And then Ish Monroe. A lot of times anglers like Ish and Dean, they'll modify the bait a little bit by shortening the legs or even adding a rattle into the body of the frog. Do you do anything to modify it?
Ish taught me a lot about frog fishing. I haven't got the pleasure to fish with Dean yet because he has invited me, and I'm going to get on to him about that. But Ish and I spend a lot of time fishing together, and he's taught me a lot about frog fishing. The first thing I'll do is pop a rattle in my frog. I don't care whose brand it is.
What type of rattle?
A glass rattle.
Is there a specific shape?
Bass Pro makes various sizes. I use kind of a bigger one. It doesn't affect my lure. You don't want to put too much in your frog to affect the way it walks. First thing I do is put a rattle in there. And the second thing I do is I bend my frog hooks up just a little bit and open them up just a little bit. So they're just above the plastic a little bit. And it's kind of hard to talk about it. It's easier to show and say, yeah, that's just right.
Well, they rest pretty much flush against the frog, so you're just trying to create a little bit of space between the body of the frog and the hook by bending them up and
That's
out.
right. And those are the only modifications. A lot of guys cut their tails down. I do not. A lot of guys cut one side so it walks different. I don't believe in that garbage. It just doesn't make any sense. Those long tails, to me, are now occasionally you'll get onto a bite with a frog bite where they do nothing but pull your tails down. Well, guess what? You can shorten them all you want. They're not going to eat that frog any better. I've tried it. It does not work. When they're pulling it down by the tails like that, they're not eating a frog that day. You better start punching or flipping something.
Talk to me about, I'm assuming you're basically throwing it on the same rod reel setup and, again, 65-pound braid?
You bet. I'm not obligated to anybody for a rod. I do exclusively Bass Pro reels because I love them, and they're easy for me to sell to my to say, hey guys, go to Bass Pro. This is a very inexpensive reel, and look at this one. It's war slick. I mean, you can't wear these reels out. So I use a Johnny Morris Carbon Light reel a lot most of the time, or a Pro Qualifier. Bass Pro makes 3 different levels of reels. They make a Extreme, which is a least amount in cost. Then you got the Pro Qualifier. Then you got the Johnny Morris and the Johnny Morris Carbon Lights, which are the higher echelon reels. But the Pro Qualifier is a great medium priced reel.
Mm-hmm.
I love them. You can put a lot of line on them. It's important that you do use I like to use a limper braid. That's why I like Maxima. I know Sunline makes a good braid too. And the rod, again, I'm not obligated by anybody to use any particular rod, so I can buy any and use any rods that I want. And I'll tell you, the best rod that I've had in my hand is Falcon's Jason Christie's Frog Rod. I mean, it's excellent. It's got the right amount of tip, and it's got all the backbone you need. It doesn't matter whether you're fishing open water, underhanging limbs, matted vegetation, grass, weeds, fields, junkyards. I mean, that rod is perfect for bringing them out of anything.
Well, you know, when you're fishing a frog, it's very easy to work it down the edge of say a lily pad field, or down the outside edge of of a vegetation line of some sort. But when you come to very heavily matted vegetation, and we're getting into the time of the year that's really going to begin to be seen in a lot of places, it's not quite as easy because you got a large area. You know there's fish in there. So how do you figure out where to throw the bait? Are you looking for little potholes? Are you looking for little points, little edges, little irregularities?
All of that. Mm-hmm. Those are all the things that you want to look on. You don't want to just throw it up in the most matted up stuff all the time. Every once in a while you got to spot check that stuff, but you want to find that hole. There might be a 3-foot gap between mats, or there might be one little trail or one little hole where something has blown up before, and you want to bring that bait up to that, into that hole, twitch, let it sit, and an eruption happens. Sometimes it happens before it gets to the hole.
That's a good point. I was just thinking of an illustration to ask that question.
Yep.
I don't think a lot of people, and I didn't understand it until I saw underwater footage looking up through vegetation. When you're on the outside of a building and you look in a window and you look at the curtain and the sun's shining down, you can't see into the room. But when you're inside the room, you can kind of see somebody. You can see a shadow that might walk by outside, and it's kind of the same thing. When you're up in the boat, you can't really see down through the pads or through the vegetation. But when you're underneath the water, you can kind of see shadows moving across, and they'll follow it for a long way.
That's right. And when sometimes you might reel it too fast on that matted vegetation for not to track it good enough. So you got to kind of work your way through that part of the fishing game too. But again, when it comes to that opening or it comes to that hard edge, bring it out there, slip it over, let it sit for a second.
That's when you get your stress test.
That's right. Let it sit for a second. Twitch, boom, then it happens. And if it doesn't, get in some cotton candy, you bring it off that hard edge, let it sit for a minute, and then real fast, twitch, and jump it back to you. So,
you know, frog fishing is about the most exciting form of bass fishing I know.
Absolutely.
It is heart-stopping every time that big explosion takes place. With that being said, knowing that you love to do that type of fishing so much, is there a fish, a moment, where you were frog or toad fishing that it stands out above all others?
Yes, I have a toad moment last year in a PAA tournament at Table Rock last year. I was catching fish real shallow on top waters, from poppars, spooks, Depths, buzz jets, a horny toad. I mean, you name it, I was catching on it. But I waited for a particular time of the day. I told my co-angler to sit down. We're going to go make a run up Long Creek, and I'm going to go flip some stuff. Well, I got back there, and there was another competitor on my flipping stuff on my mud flat. And I said, we'll go to the back, we'll fish this. And I said, maybe he'll leave. Well, he left eventually, and I come running out. And I said, oh, heck with that. I got a little stretch of rock bank and some bushes and a little bluff cut here I want to throw my toad in. And about that time, I come running around the corner. That old boy had already moved out, and he was fishing down that particular bank. And he was coming right to the juice. Mm-hmm. I mean, almost to the nectar. And I said, oh, crap. And I just kept running. About that time, he pulls the cord on his trolling motor. I just whip it around, go back towards that cut, start about 50 yards before that cut, and he left. And I got up to the very back of the cut, and I had one good long cast in the back of this cut that wasn't as wide as this room here. And threw my toad back there, and I already have a limit to weigh about 12 pounds. I said, I need a big one, and I threw it. And just like this, I said, come on, eat it. And I'm reeling. And I'm saying, come on, big one, come on. All of a sudden, a 5.5 pounder or 6 pounder 590, comes out and smokes it. And my co-angler and I both about crap our pants. I mean, it was like, he's like, how did you do that? And I said, I don't know. I said, but if there's going to be a big one, that was where he was going to be. And I called my shot. I was like, eat it, eat it, eat it. And I said, get to that. And that was my most favorite toad moment ever. I was like, unbelievable.
Those moments are exciting and they are unbelievable.
Yeah.
James, thanks for talking to us about toad and frog fishing. If you want to learn more about toad and frog fishing or any form of Major League anglers and what they like to do, go to MajorLeagueFishing.com.